have in studio?
Take it easy on him, not you. At least you have to put up with me every morning. You are hanging out with me, Felaris and Chico. And now we are joined by none other than Dr. Ed Barnett, who's the UK's Deputy High Commissioner to Kenya. Now, hot on the heels of President Ruto's talks with Prime Minister Starmer in London yesterday, Kenya and the UK have unveiled a strategic partnership for the years 2025 to 2030. So, of course, promising billions in trade, innovation, clean energy, climate finance, and security cooperation. Now, that's a lot if you think about it. But beyond these headlines, what does this partnership really mean for Kenyans, businesses, and the region? What are the guarantees that these timelines and the mechanisms of accountability are actually in place? You know how we say good on paper, but it all comes down to execution? Well, the man with all the answers is here with us in studio. So, karibu sana. Should I call you Ed?
You can call me Ed.
There we go. You introduced yourself as Ed, so that's good.
All right. So perhaps we start off with just painting a picture of what that trip from President William Ruto to the PM actually means for both countries, so to speak, because we had a similar one between 2020 to 2025. This one is just continuing and hopefully solidifying it further. So paint a picture from the UK perspective of what this will look like.
Chico, Felaris, Asante Sana, thank you very much for having me on the show. Even better for the welcome tune of Sweet Caroline and Neil Diamond, a football anthem back in England, and hope that bodes well for the women's team in this year's European Football Championship final. So that was a great introduction. Thank you for that.
Super.
So what does it mean? I think it's a moment to celebrate the relationship that we have between Kenya and the UK, the Kenyan people, the British people, to build on what we've achieved over the last 5 years and really create opportunity for both countries over the next 5 years, creating jobs, strengthening those relationships in science, technology, protecting the planet, protecting our people, and really delivering in the interest both of Kenyans and the British people. And it reflects actually a lot of what we've heard over the last 6 months in the conversations that we've been having here in Kenya across a whole broad range of stakeholders. And of course, it also reflects the priorities of both of our governments.
Interesting. It's been described as modern, and I'm reading modern, innovative, respectful. What makes it different from the one I've just talked about, the 2020 to 2025 pact and the framework?
What makes it different? I think what makes it different first is that it builds on where we've got to. So we've got so far over the past 5 years, we need to now climb higher. Modern, respectful, what's that about? That's about focusing on a partnership, an equal partnership, a partnership that reflects the interests both of Kenya and of the UK. So this is a partnership that creates jobs, not just in the UK, not just in Kenya, but in both of those places. It grows the UK economy. At the moment, as you may be aware, a focus on economic growth is really the cornerstone of the new UK government's priorities. And similarly, I think that reflects the big priority for Kenya too. So as listeners will have seen in terms of His Excellency President Ruto's first day in London yesterday, a big focus of that has been on the economic opportunities that are created through the partnership that we have between these two countries.
And before we even get to the very details of this partnership that was signed yesterday, I want to reference an article that's on the Daily Nation today. That's on page 8. Both Nairobi and London say, I'm reading this in part actually, both Nairobi and London say the partnership of 2020 has worked somehow in spite of some controversies, especially related to the discipline of British troops training in Kenya. They cite the beginning of the African Green Industrialization Initiative that is worth 17 billion pounds, that's about $23 billion, and the establishment of the Railway City Secretariat and the launch of the Dhamana Guarantee Company for climate financing. So these are some of the things that have actually been highlighted as having been, controversies to whatever previous partnership there was. Maybe your comments on that.
Sure, thank you. So you've highlighted there some of the key building blocks, if you like, of the partnership that's been signed yesterday, including the establishment of the African Green Industrialization Initiative. That's a mouthful, but that's really saying that a lot of these big deals that create economic opportunity, that create jobs, they take time to establish. So if we look at yesterday's visit by the Kenyan delegation led by President Ruto to King's Cross railway station in London, that is about Nairobi Railway City. That's talking about the future for Nairobi, for Kenya, in terms of having a green transport hub connecting the city. That's a long-term vision, and it's right that governments are focused on investment today to deliver for the people in 10, 15 years from now. So that's one of the key elements, in a sense, as I said, building and setting the foundations for the partnership that was signed yesterday. In terms of the security relationship that we have, we will continue to build on that. The UK and Kenya have a deep and highly valued partnership when it comes to security, both here in Kenya and in the region, and the important role that Kenya plays in terms of peacekeeping in the region and back in the UK.
Now, there's several pillars we're going to talk about. And by the way, you can stream us. I'm actually talking to the camera in front of me. You can stream this interview via our social media platforms, YouTube, I think, X.
And Facebook.
And Facebook, those three. And you can catch this interview and see the man in studio. So the 7 pillars: governance, human rights and shared values, people to people and diaspora ties, which we hope to get through all of them: security, peace, defense, cooperation, technology, AI and digital economy, infrastructure, and we'll be talking about climate action and green growth, and not to mention where we will start off with trade, investment, and economic cooperation. I guess the first thing would be one of the ambitious goals of the new partnership is to double bilateral trade by 2030. How? Talk us through those concrete steps that have been set aside in order to make this a reality.
Thank you, Chico. As I said, our economic partnership is at the cornerstone of the relationship between the UK and Kenya. Already the UK is one of the leading foreign investors into the Kenyan economy, and with that comes a significant number of UK companies, 150 plus, employing 250,000, at least 250,000 Kenyans here in Kenya. And then, as I said, we are targeting a number of deals that can help drive that real ambition in terms of doubling trade between the two countries. So the work that we're doing on Nairobi Railway City is one example of that. There are also several other big investments with a big focus on green growth in particular, be that the Menengai geothermal plant, the Malindi solar plant, the Grand High Falls Dam. So there are a number of significant initiatives in the pipeline that we're working hard on together that can help us deliver on that ambition to double trade over the next 5 years.
You talked about Nairobi Railway City, correct? How about we just skip to that pillar and have a quick chat, because it's part of the infrastructure discussion we were going to have, now that you've brought it up. Mind giving us more inroads in terms of UK's involvement in it and what Kenyans can actually expect in terms of the impact on transport, jobs, and urban settlement, aka renewal?
So as I said, it's a bold vision for a real green transport transformation of Nairobi, but over the long term. So we're talking 5-10 years plus for that vision to be realised. The UK's involvement in part is drawing inspiration from what the UK has done in London with King's Cross railway station in central London. This was a big investment over the previous 10 years in London, in an area of London that was relatively run down, and yet we used that central station of King's Cross as an anchor investment to create economic opportunity, to improve transport connectivity, to bring in new businesses. The likes of Google and other big tech companies have now set up their offices in and around that King's Cross development. There's also significant housing and residential accommodation around that central station. So part of that UK involvement is saying, hey, what can we learn from this experience in the King's Cross to take back and think about how we transform and use an investment in a central station here in Nairobi to drive that kind of economic opportunity, urban regeneration.
I like that. It's a very big promise.
Yes, it is. Sounds really good.
Sounds really
the execution
good.
Is where a lot of Kenyans are very doubtful.
Correct.
And, we're pessimistic, but I tend to hold on to hope. Hope springs eternal. So we'll keep an eye on that. Speaking of...
But maybe if I should just say that, as I said, this is a long-term project. That
Correct.
central station is the first step of many steps.
Yeah.
But the experience of King's Cross is that initial anchor central station is a really key first step to help the multiplier effect of all the other things that may follow from that.
Some figures being thrown around. I read 100 million pounds. That is a kind of figure that's been thrown into Kenya's innovation and digital economy, right? Yeah. The question is how it trickles down and actually helps startups in this country, young entrepreneurs, because a recent study showed that 60% of the population in Kenya is actually between 70. 20 and below, the ages of 20 and below. When it comes to 70%, the one you're talking about, it's 30 and below. This is the future of this country. How does this cash trickle down and help in the growth of the economy while supporting the future?
So science and technology is one of the four new pillars of the strategic partnership. And yet again, it's an example of how we're building on what we've done over the past 5 years. So for example, over the past 5 years, through what we're calling the Digital Access Program, we've been providing training for over 4 million young Kenyans in terms of digital literacy skills. We've also been working really hard to support some of these startups across the country, and I think Kenya is a continental leader in terms of the startup economy, if you like, and the kind of investment that is able to draw in. What we want to do is now take that a step further. So how do we link the brilliance of the ideas that are being generated in the startups that are coming up here in Kenya with private equity, capital investment that can build those startups, mature them into viable and sustainable, economically sustainable companies and creating jobs as it does so. So how does it trickle down? We're targeting 30,000 new jobs through the startup economy. And those are jobs that young Kenyans will be very well placed to get.
What sectors are we looking at?
So to a certain extent, it's sector agnostic, but of course we're trying to focus our energy and effort in areas of real potential, be that in health tech, fintech, that we're familiar is already a real success here in Kenya. But through the UK Kenya Tech Hub, we have lots of outreach into the startup world. And continue to look for where the best possible growth areas are.
Sorry for being this guy, but the president did actually say 30,000 jobs. Now, I know you're well aware with happenings in the country and the tensions or the support, and we're not going to delve into that, at least not right now. But he said this, there was a lot of people who had question marks and doubts. Now, in case you are unaware, this government has been painted, especially the president, in terms of making promises and not delivering. You've talked about King's Crossing, talked about the likes of Google. We've heard that I've spoken to Google, and they're coming to give jobs. Apple, I think, was one of the things that was included.
And Meta.
Meta was one of the things that has been mentioned by the president. On top of, this stadium in Wote, 6 months' time, and other African stories. But when it comes to this, in partnership with the UK, because now your credibility as a nation is indeed brought into this whole situation, how is the accountability? I know you said it's over the course of time. That will be taken into consideration. But how do you hold yourself or this agreement and the two governments hold themselves accountable to delivering what's been promised?
people are right to be sceptical of the agreements and commitments that governments make, wherever those governments are in the world. It's also important that people hold those governments to account for the commitments that they do make. What's different about this new UK-Kenya strategic partnership? It's an attempt to ensure that we get stuff done over the next 5 years. Yeah. And how are we going to do that? We're going to do that by being more specific about what it is that we want to get done. So when we talk about the Nairobi Railway City investment, when we talk about creating 30,000 jobs in the startup economy with £100 million crowding in of investment, that's saying that's what we want to set out to achieve. And therefore, if we don't achieve that, we haven't made it. Now, if we took out those numbers, it would be harder to hold us to account for what it is that we want to do. So I think that's that's a really big focus of this strategic partnership. In fact, if I had a strap line for the Kenya-UK strategic partnership, it's a partnership that gets stuff done.
I like that strap line.
We are here in conversation with the Deputy High Commissioner to the, here in Kenya from the United Kingdom. That's Dr. Ed Barnett. We're going to be right back because we'll still focus on the commitment of 100, you said 100 million?
100 million pounds.
Oh, there we go. 100 million pounds to discuss AI, tech, the digital economy, and what kind of support we are looking at, amongst other things, including climate action, security and peace, and also maybe to get your thoughts on democracy here in Kenya with everything that's been happening. Well, you are hanging out with me, Felarius and Chico, and Dr. Ed, who is, part of the awesome trio here on the Midweek Mixdown. Do not touch that dial. We're going to be right back.
This is not an announcement. It's a pact.
To plant trees and protect our environment.
To drive mentorship and education.
To grow businesses with funding and training.
To share with our communities.
Since 2020, we've honored this pact.
As we mark 5 years, we renew it because all impact begins with a pact. I&M Foundation, celebrating 5 years of impact, powered by I&M Bank.
Capital Sports Update, where sports is taken seriously.
The Kenyan-born, German-born fencer, that is, Alexander Ndolo, will be traveling to Poland for a training camp before the World Championships, where she hopes to take a stab at a podium finish. Ndolo recently clinched her third African title in a row and says that three-peat, that specific one, has improved her confidence ahead of the Worlds this month in Georgia.
I'm going to rest now for a few days, meet up with my family as well, because I've been traveling a lot in the past weeks. Then I will train first in Germany and then go to Poland for a training camp with other countries. I'm happy about the international training camp because that's a good way to have a couple of really strong days with tough opponents, everyone in top shape.
Well, the 38-year-old won in the women's EP competition with an unbeaten run in Lagos and scoring her status as the finest fencer on this continent. Elsewhere, Arsenal have completed the signing of goalkeeper Kepa Arrizabalaga from Chelsea. Spain international Kepa joins the Gunners, the future champions of the Premier League next season. He has joined them on a 3-year deal after spending last term on loan at Bournemouth, where he made 35 appearances in all competitions throughout that season. The 30-year-old is still the world's most expensive goalkeeper still, having moved from the Blues back in 2018, moved to the Blues, I should say, from Atletico Bilbao for how much? Yeah, £71 million. And that man will be number 2 between the sticks for the mighty Arsenal. Finally, Trent Alexander-Arnold registered his first assist as a Real Madrid player as Xabi Alonso's side beat Juventus 1-0, reaching the quarterfinals of the Club World Cup. Alexander-Arnold, making his 4th successive start at the tournament, endured a quiet first half at the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, but he did deliver, I'll say that. A rather delicious cross, as if you tasted it, but you get the picture, painting a picture here. Delivered that cross, from which Garcia Gonzalo nodded Madrid ahead 9 minutes into the second half, and that was pretty much all it took. Alonso's team will be facing the winners of the last 16 tie between Borussia Dortmund and Monterrey in the quarterfinals this weekend. That is your Capital FM Sports Update. We're done. back to the discussion.
Capital Sports Update. Up to the minute sports, where sports is taken seriously.
Dua Lipa, well, one kiss is all we want you to give us. How about you send 1 million of them? Remember, you could always link up with us on our WhatsApp number. That's 0701984984 or at 984 in the morning using the hashtag #DriveIn. Do send us your thoughts. We are here in studio with Dr. Ed Barnett, who's the UK's Deputy High Commissioner here in Kenya.
Forget one kiss. Let's talk about one trip. You talk about kiss and sending us kisses, and I'm sure there's a radio station across the town that is probably thinking, hey, that's us.
That's us.
No,
Well,
this is Capital
no.
FM. Welcome. It's Capital in the Morning for Larry and Chico. By the way, one trip. It looks like that's all it's taken to get this thing back to life. 2020 to 2025 were 5 years that we will evaluate at the end of this conversation. How, when you look back, how much was achieved so that we can have an idea of what to expect coming into this second 5 years. Meanwhile, I guess we can come back with a very interesting question while the mics were off. Phalaris who does financial forecast, so you understand where this question is coming through. Meanwhile, please do not miss out on Financial Focus Tuesdays.
Yeah, we are coming back with a bang next 2 weeks, season 7. Very excited.
Extremely.
Maybe we should have you over on the Financial Focus. We can discuss numbers and look at this with a fine-toothed comb.
Yeah.
Very, very happy to join.
Meanwhile, we're just looking at
Absolutely.
this with a white brush, just quickly try and set our hair just so that we know. Very sarcastic, I should talk about hair. Anyway, listen, there is a very interesting questions in terms of startups that I think everyone would love to hear an answer
Actually, it's a conversation that keeps on being had within the startup communities and entrepreneurs, is that governments do come in with big commitments when it comes to funding the startups and entrepreneurs. But there's a few things that are not in the fine print, which is a requirement of having, quote unquote, a white face as part of your founders. Actually, just on paper, you just need to have a white face on paper that guarantees you access to this money. Maybe to get your thoughts. I know there's no guarantees in life and there's no guarantees to this. Different organizations are going to work in very different ways. But what are your thoughts on this?
Through the UK Kenya Tech Hub, we're constantly engaging with startups and entrepreneurs here in Kenya and getting their views on how best we can work together to support their ambition.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important for this new Kenya-UK strategic partnership to be ambitious. We want to set the bar high we want people to hold us to account for delivering on that ambition. But your question is a good one. And what we're seeking to do, as we were discussing earlier, is to crowd in £100 million worth of finance to support at least 500 startups over the next 5 years.
Wow.
But what about the barriers to doing that? They're significant. But I think through the engagement that we continue to have, particularly through our UK Kenya Tech Hub, including the work that they do with startups, just recently, last month, took some of the leading startups here in Kenya over to London, where London as a financial centre is a great source of private capital to support those startups with their growth and their longer term journey. So it's exactly that, by strengthening those relationships, by providing support and training to startups here in Kenya, that we can break down either those explicit or implicit barriers to accessing more finance. But the UK is really serious about this, which is why also in this new strategic partnership, we're committing to explore a new digital services agreement between the UK and Kenya. So that's about free trade in digital services and how we can therefore accelerate and maximize the opportunities in digital services in particular, which we know is a bigger growth area for startups in Kenya.
Interesting, because, sorry for interrupting, but a quick one. It's not the only thing you're looking to do. You're also looking to equip 2.5 million Kenyans with digital skills. What kind of programs are we talking and partnerships being planned to deliver this, and take into consideration the manner in which the digital ecosystem has been used in the wrong way to a certain extent, especially in this country? It's a very touchy subject with the government, because I actually made a note taking a rather stern stance on digital freedom, so to speak, and trying to ensure there's a balance. Then the UK is coming in, equipping even more people, especially the young generation, with digital skills, whether it's AI, which has had people arrested and some, disappeared, or whether it's just being able to do work through these digital skills. How do you balance the two?
So this is one of the areas that we are building on through what we've done over the past 5 years, as I mentioned earlier, through our digital access program. I was lucky enough, I've been in Kenya now for nearly a year. In the first few months that I was here, I was traveling to Busia to launch the start of the digital access program there in Western Kenya, a program that is about supporting, as you say, Chico, equipping young people with digital literacy skills and then connecting them to economic opportunity. In Busia's case, this is in the agricultural sector in particular. We're doing the same in Mandera up in northeast Kenya, which is a particular focus for the UK in terms of those populations that perhaps don't get as much opportunity as those that live in and around the big urban centres of Kisumu, Nairobi and Mombasa. So that is about equipping young people with digital skills. These are skills building on the foundational skills that we learn at primary and secondary school. These are the skills of today and the future. And it's really important in terms of creating economic opportunity, particularly for young people, which, as you said yourself, is a part of the population that struggles to get the gainful employment that they need. Of course, it's always a balance, and we're all grappling with this technological frontier. We grapple with that as societies, as governments, which is also why we see an opportunity in the partnership that we've set out here in terms of on artificial intelligence between the UK and Kenya, particularly from the perspective of how do we govern this space? What are the ethics around it? So we were really pleased earlier this year to co-host with Kenya an Africa convening on artificial intelligence ahead of the big summit that took place in Paris earlier this year.
They have the skill. We equip them. But unlike the UK and more developed countries, when it comes to Kenya, the infrastructure to allow them to, gain or grow in this is kind of difficult. It's almost non-existent. Whether it's the laptops that you need the equipment you'd need in order to showcase your skill and make money from it, or just the environment that's conducive. Who are we looking at for this? Is this strictly for the Kenyan government, or will the UK help in building the infrastructure that will help? the growth?
So this Kenya-UK strategic partnership is to facilitate opportunity. Of course, it's a government-to-government partnership, but it's trying to enable opportunity for all Kenyans and people in the UK, whether that's to get new jobs, develop new skills, or seize new opportunities. So yes, in some circumstances, we have provided some hardware, including IT hardware, alongside the skilling program that we have on digital access. So more recently, in the last couple of months, I was flagging off some computers and laptops that were heading up to Mandera to accompany the skills program that we had there. But neither the government of Kenya nor the government of the UK has all the answers, and rightly so. It's the brilliance of the populations on both sides that can find the opportunities and meet the challenges that we face.
You know, you say neither governments have all the answers. So what stakeholders are we looking at, involving to bridge the gaps that we're looking at? Are there private institutions that we're also looking to include in this partnership? Because then the execution cannot just be left to both governments.
Indeed, and as you read through the press releases accompanying the announcement of the new strategic partnership, I think it makes clear that this does involve government investment. It does involve government leadership. It does involve holding our governments to account for the commitments they make. But it's also about the role that we are playing to enable other sources of expertise, other sources of finance, be that from civil society or be that from the private sector. As we were discussing earlier, in terms of the commitment around drawing in £100 million worth of finance to support the startup economy, that's not £100 million from the government of the UK. That's the role that we as the government of the UK play to try and crowd in that private finance, which ultimately will be much more sustainable and much more effective in delivering long-term benefits.
Is it going to be like a free market kind of situation? You've spoken about opening opportunities for both countries and the citizens in both countries, but it would be ignorant of me not to realize that the UK is more advanced in terms of where they are, whether it's technology or however you look at it. These opportunities might give them an extra edge and at the cost of Kenya, or is there structures set in place to ensure that there's balanced, more equitable situation there?
So yes, we have an we have an economic partnership agreement between Kenya and the UK that facilitates free trade between our two countries. And actually, when we talk about the success of the existing strategic partnership, we've been able to demonstrate progress in that space when last year we cut the tariffs on flowers by 8%, which had a huge impact on flower growers and sellers here in Kenya and access to the UK economy. But when you look across the strategic partnership, yes, it's going to be delivering jobs both in Kenya and the UK. But for example, on Nairobi Railway City, we can envisage that the new central station could generate up to 10,000 direct or indirect jobs in the Kenyan market. It will create some jobs in the UK too, mainly focused on services, so probably significantly fewer of them. But then when we come to the digital space, we've talked about the training on digital literacy, particularly for young people here in Kenya. That's not mirrored back in the UK. That's a support here on this side. But of course, we then need capital investment, and hopefully we can draw in where the UK is already one of the leading foreign direct investors here in Kenya. We want to draw more of that private capital into Kenya to create more opportunity.
I want us to shift gears to
climate, perhaps.
Climate and also immigration issues, because those are very, very big pertinent issues. Now, I also want to quote the same article on the Daily Nation today. The UK has bigger problems it wants Kenya to help address. And this is the scourge of illegal migration. Now, turning to migration, the Prime Minister and President Ruto welcomed new UK-Kenya security agreement to disrupt organized immigration, crime and human trafficking in Kenya to prevent onward migration to Europe, because then there's a route there. And clearly this will not be coming off of thin air. There's context to this. And we've seen the UK react and actually issue stricter measures in terms of people being able to go to the UK. Now, I build up on this because these additional routes that, access to the UK is now there. Kenya Airways is now flying 3 times to the UK, Gatwick. We have flights to London. We are opening up the UK to Kenyans, no problem. But we also have stricter migration laws. Balance the two.
So you're right to say that a focus on clamping down on irregular migration is a top priority for the UK government. And it is also true that in terms of Kenya's near neighbours and in terms of the people who are arriving irregularly into the UK, there are many countries that surround Kenya and citizens from those countries who are ending up in the UK, often having moved through criminal networks and or be moved by criminal networks to reach the UK. And so it's in that context that we have been and will continue to work with Kenyan authorities to crack down on what is criminal activity. This is not about actually Kenyans arriving in the UK, but the extent to which Kenya is used as a transit hub for human trafficking and or for organised immigration crime. So I think this is both in the UK and Kenya's interests in terms of clamping down on what are criminal networks that facilitate the movement of people, often against their will, crossing borders and ending up into North Africa and into Europe.
So this is inland kind of illegal immigration into the UK.
Indeed.
So we
yes.
have porous borders.
Indeed, yeah. Which is also why, when you look at the priority that we have on security and stability writ large, the UK and Kenya continue to work closely together on regional stability. And Kenya's leadership and African Union leadership and regional bodies leadership on finding resolutions to some of the conflicts that we have in this region.
Interesting, you should bring that regional security and stability about, because that's somewhere I'd like us to delve into, especially when it comes to this partnership in 2 angles. First, with all these stories that we've heard of the British Army and the scandals that can happen here, that women, they go, persecution is a very minimal, if at all, if any at all. So that's something that we will definitely like to get your reaction for. But there was a strong-worded joint statement, for lack of a better word, from the countries, from the Western countries here in Kenya ahead of the maandamano. It was very strong-worded. A lot of people felt that instead of just saying it, could we see some sanctions following up, considering what's been happening in this country? We're talking about stability. We're talking about security. We're seeing what's happening in this country. People being killed, people being abducted, disappearances, point-blank shootings of protesters, some who were business people selling a mask. There's just so much a blogger disappearing from taken from his family home, his father having lunch, then appears dead in the police cell. The stories are going round. We have DIG, Deputy Inspector General, who is in the middle of that Albert Ojwang situation where he was killed because he said something about him, and yet no one in the government is seemingly moving to do anything apart from offer a check, offer a home, what the Standard today call blood money. How do you relate those two? How do you balance them? How do you marry these two, where you are talking about security, you're talking about accountability, yet the government, whom you've gone into a partnership with, or extended the partnership, you've not gone into it, you were there before, is doing all these things in the country in which you're partnering with?
First, let me just pass condolences to the family and friends of loved ones who have been lost over the past few weeks in some of the events that you have set out, Chico. We've been deeply disturbed by violence against unarmed civilians, and we have urged swift, independent and transparent investigation into the actions of the police. It's really important that the police must command the trust and confidence of those that they are duty-bound to protect. And it's in that context, and as friends and strategic partners, the UK can and should raise difficult issues with our Government of Kenya counterparts, which we do so often in private, because that's where we deem it can be most effective. But also there are times when we issue public statements too. So Chico, you alluded to a statement that was put out by a number of diplomatic missions just ahead of the 1 year anniversary of the protests against the finance bill. And that was about trying to encourage authorities to protect that space for peaceful protests. But ultimately, it's absolutely critical that anyone who has committed a crime is held to account, whoever they are. And that is the position that we have.
Really good position. What about your position on this security, which we can just delve into, because I was reading security and regional stability, also key pillars, something you've already mentioned. So how do you enhance defense cooperation agreement strengthening counterterrorism, cybersecurity, and peacekeeping efforts in Kenya and the wider region? When I say peacekeeping, the first thing that comes to mind is how you're playing, what part you're playing in supporting like Kenya's leadership in missions such as Haiti, for example, which has had its ups and downs, supports and, disagreements.
So as I said, we see the UK sees Kenya as a really important partner in regional stability, but also further afield, including in Haiti, where the government of the United Kingdom has made a contribution to the mission in Haiti. Of course, the discussions on the future of that mission and its financing are ongoing, and we will continue to play an active part in those conversations. Closer to home here in Kenya, of course, is the huge sacrifice that the Kenyan Defence Forces have played over more than a decade in Somalia, and the role that the UK also plays working with Kenya and other neighbouring countries that contribute their armed forces to seeking peace in Somalia, and the progress that's been made over time. The UK, with our Foreign Secretary, called a conference in April on the conflict in Sudan, and the Prime Cabinet Secretary represented the government of Kenya there. That was about thinking through and trying to drive forward political progress to find a sustainable peace in Sudan, but also recognised what a terrible humanitarian situation we currently have in Sudan and the need for unhindered humanitarian access to support the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Sudanese in need of humanitarian support.
Speaking of Sudan, how about I just throw this in there since you brought it up? Association. Usually you're guilty by association. Now, when you have this partnership and you've talked about these things, the missions you've been supporting the Kenya government, then we have statements and support like the RDF, Hemedi coming through into the country, that Sudan, some faction of it, comes in and launches a parallel government in this country under the very nose of the government, who says nothing, which means by that virtue of that they are okay with it or they're consenting to it. How do you balance this? How does the UK not appear to be complicit and associated with this, but yes, still manage to maintain this partnership?
The conflict in Sudan is complex and difficult to unpick. So the role that the UK wants to play is not to step in and say we need to create a new process, but how can we put political momentum by bringing together all of the key actors, both here in the region and further afield, in order to forge a way forward. And that's exactly what the UK did by calling in regional partners and those from the Gulf and further afield to come and have exactly that conversation and say, how do we unpick this and how do we find a way forward for sustainable peace in Sudan?
Before we wrap up, I want to get your comments just on something that we haven't exactly touched on so much, which is climate action and green growth. So we've seen Kenyan government make very big commitments and has very ambitious goals when it comes to, climate change, sustainability and all of that. And the UK is actually committing £200 million in green financing. So maybe give us the priority projects in this and what that kind of looks like when it comes to disaster resilience for this country.
Thank you very much. Kenya, as you say, Philaris, is a real leader in terms of both global climate action. Kenya hosted last year the Africa Climate Summit, for example, but also tangible climate impact here in Kenya in terms of the extent of use of renewable energy across Kenya.
Yeah.
So I think the strategic partnership is saying the UK and Kenya see an opportunity for joint work together on global leadership. How can we work together in the big global fora, be that COP or other such fora, where we can ensure that we keep 1.5 degrees within reach, where we can also do what we can to look to mobilize the financing needed to help countries, including those like Kenya, adapt to a changing climate. But of course, there are populations that remain super vulnerable, which is why we set out a commitment to increase climate and disaster resilience for over 3 million people, including through innovative financing mechanisms that can support, including through insurance, for example, those populations here in Kenya that are particularly at risk or suffer from the impacts of climate change.
It's very interesting to see this, because it's been an ongoing conversation of how basically countries in the global south can access and continue to receive climate financing from other countries that are huge pollutants. And really, it's good to see this kind of commitment. 200 million pounds that is coming in. This in the period of 5 years between now and 2030.
Yes. Yeah.
For programs that would be running under climate action and green growth.
So as you say, Philaris, it's not just, so it's good to have a big number, 200 million pounds, as you say, on climate finance, but it's also really important that countries are able to access that finance.
Correct.
And what the UK is trying to do is both generate and ensure we have the financing available, but the communities that need to access that finance are able to do so. So it's working on both sides, the delivery of the finance and ensuring that communities can access that finance.
Absolutely. As we wrap up, I want to ask you a very random question. What football team do you support?
Better say Arsenal.
I see how you're looking at him.
Southampton.
I'll give you that. Churning out some amazing talents for every league.
Including for Arsenal.
For Arsenal, especially for Arsenal. Thank you very much. So yeah, I'll accept that.
That's absolutely wonderful. We've been in conversation
That tells me
with
everything about your ambitions.
We're bouncing back.
Okay. I'll keep an eye out on that one.
This is actually where I wish you a happy sports journalist today.
Oh,
today is your day.
It is?
Yeah.
Man, I've been doing this for so many years. I think I shouldn't be just wished a happy one. A cake should be here. People should celebrate greatness before it disappears.
Well, the greatness is right in front of us in the form of Deputy High Commissioner Ed Barnett. That's all the time we have today. Thank you so much for joining us here on Capital in the Morning with me, Philaris. Chico here. We look forward to, of course, having more conversations to just keep track on what's happening as far as this partnership and agreement is concerned. We should do like a 1-year check. We should be doing 6-month checks, 1-year checks, just to see are we making progress. And by the time it gets to 2030, we'll be able to say, okay, this is how much we've been able to achieve based on the promises made.
Philaris, thank you. Please do hold us to account. We look forward to being back.
Oh, super. That's all the time we had today. Well, listen, we are not bidding you goodbye. We are here with the news, Davis. And stick around because DJ Schwaz is going to be back with the midweek mixdown.
Mix of music, Capital FM.
Capital Newsbeat with Insurance Regulatory